Hey, welcome. Today we're going to learn how to build something with Switchboard, a voice changer specifically, with Claude Code. Here I'm going through my instructions to Claude.md. I'm detailing where to get some resources, my preference for test-driven development, how to track tasks and some dependencies to use, where to find them, some usage tips. I put all this together using a different language model. Just to prime the pump here, you can do that in a number of ways, but I'll talk more as we go on. All right, so I've loaded up Claude Code here, and I'm going to put in a prompt. I'd like to put together a voice changer demo with 10 different, substantially different voice filters. Now, because I'd primed Claude Code with Claude.md with a lot of details, uh, I'm just telling it how to generally use what to generally do. Um, Now, as I was saying, you can structure your Claude.md as just an index and point to different Markdown files. Maybe you'd want to have your code samples in one area, your list of dependencies in another. This is a relatively simple app, so I kept it simple with my Claude.md. Or you can see in my prompt, I'm telling it to um, keep a simple UI, generally doing a one-shot, like make a complete app. You'd want to break it down into more steps than that, just because there's a lot of details in putting together an application. Here's an interesting bit. I'm telling it to use Harvard sentences, which is a classical way out of Harvard University to test audio um, systems. They're basically just a series of audio samples that test out all the phonemes in English in a set of a few sentences. All right, you'll note that I've put Claude into plan mode. That's always a good way to start out. Um, it's going to just go through all the instructions that I got and come up with a plan for my review that you can set out. Now, I decided after the fact that I wanted to make sure that it used Git to track its changes. That's a great way to add some save points into the system, and you can always track back if Claude takes you off in a totally random direction. I told it to ask me some clarifying questions, so it's doing that very thing, and I'm giving it answers. I want to keep the UI really simple, console based. It asked me how to change how I want to change through voices. Here it's asking me about the Harvard sentences that I was just talking about. Um, you can see it's asking if I want to do anything on the display or anything, and I'm telling it just to download them from a public repository and keep it simple. I just want it for testing action. It's asking me about the presets that I want to build, and I want to keep this really simple. So, simple list of presets is totally fine for me. See, it's asking me now what kind of presets I want. Just for demo purposes, I'm going to go with the dramatic option. Now you'll see that Claude says it's got everything it needs to put together a plan, so it's spawning a new agent to do that. That gives it an entirely new context window. You'll find throughout this that managing context is one of the biggest things about using a coding agent. We'll be demonstrating how to do that as we go on, very simply. All right, it's asking me whether it can download certain resources. Of course, I'm saying yes. GitHub, that's fine. But I'd like it to clone the repository instead of downloading it from the API or accessing it from the web. Now, I had to tell it a couple of times, so I asked it to interrupt. Now it's looking for dependencies. Now, I don't want it to do that, so I'm going to tell it to clone these dependent repositories. Now, it recognized after a couple of times that I wanted to do something different, so I'm going to clarify at the top level that I want to clone repositories rather than looking system-wide for any dependencies. All right, it seems to follow. Now I again tried to download something from GitHub, even though I just told it to clone the repositories. I think that is because it's in, oh, again, I think that's because it's in plan mode. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get it to clarify why exactly it keeps downloading stuff over the web from GitHub. Again, I'm telling it to clone the repository. I haven't quite clued into what's going on, so I'm going to interrupt it soon and get it to clarify. This is one of the frustrating things about using a language model. Sometimes it doesn't tell you exactly why it's doing what it is. You can see how many times I've told it that I don't want to do it this way, but it's carrying on. So I'm going to interrupt it, and I'm going to ask it what it's doing. All right, so it's clarified it's in plan mode. I'm going to tell it to stop. I'm going to take it out of plan mode, and I'm going to tell it to get all of its dependencies so that it can make a plan knowing the context of the dependencies that it's going to use. That looks better. Initializing the repository, making an external directory, and cloning the various dependencies into that directory. Catch 2 for testing, that's great. Downloading Switchboard and the Switchboard audio extensions for Linux. Now I chose Linux for this because for a couple of reasons. A, it's the computer that I use on a regular basis. But B, because development tools tend to be command line oriented, and Claude has a very easy time debugging and doing memory leak analysis with Valgrind, that sort of thing on Linux. It's a great prototyping platform. Now, of course, Mac OS would be similar. Any POSIX operating system. I just happen to be a Linux man. Um, and Windows Subsystem for Linux are great alternatives if you happen to be using a Mac or Windows box, respectively. Okay, it's asking me what Harvard sentences I want to use. Um, saying there's a free one and there's a commercial one. I'm a commercial enterprise, so I'm going to use the free version, even though it's not the perfect sample rate, 8 kilohertz. Okay, it's double checking that we have all of the assets we need. Time to go back into plan mode. See, it noticed automatically that I put it back into plan mode, so now it's gonna look at everything we just downloaded. See, I noticed that it was complaining that it missed a dependency. Um, so I just let it know that it can clone that, of course. It added that to the plan. Since that's just a dependency for Signalsmith, our pitch shifting library, I'm not too concerned about the plan having access to it. We're not going to be using linear directly. It's acknowledging the existence of the Switchboard SDK license. That's perfect. It's now asking what I want the Switchboard extension to be named. The Switchboard C++ extensions template library has Python invoke commands for renaming it. By default, it spotted that and asking me how I want to use it. Voice changer is fine. All right, now it's writing a plan. That's going to take a bit, so a little bit about plan mode. Um, it's just an opportunity. Sometimes if you don't put Claude into plan mode, it will go ahead and start making changes long before it has enough context to necessarily make shrewd decisions. So when I'm starting a project like this, you'll see my process is to um, put together a prompt and cues in another large language model, and then run plan mode so that I can review everything that it's going to do. See, it's giving me a list of presets. It's giving me some implementation processes, cloning, building CMake. It's talking about the test infrastructure and how it's going to build core audio nodes, how it's going to register the extension into Switchboard, which is very useful, and then some technical considerations. They all look good to me. And then a verification plan, including the Harvard sentences that we talked about. Okay, and so I told it to just go ahead. I auto-accepted changes so that it's it can write any files in this empty directory that it wants. Now it'll still ask me for permission to do certain things, as you'll see, if they require resources outside of what's in this directory. But I want it to be able to write as many files as possible, so I just gave it automatic permission. Uh, once we get into the debugging phase of the project, I often turn that off so that I can have a tighter control over what it's building. All right, just like I asked, it's putting together a build system and it's putting together some automation. It's keeping a to-do list to track everything that it's doing. This is really useful for managing context because you can get it to pause and then either reset the context or close Claude and start up a new session, and you'll have a lot of the information about what you were working on. You can just say, hey, we were working on this to-do list, keep it going. Sometimes, depending on the complexity of the project, I also get it to keep a process log that is a list of everything that it's done already in a set of markdown files. That can be helpful for between sessions, tracking what's already been done, how it's been done, a little bit of process. This is a relatively simple project, so I haven't bothered to do that here. You can see now it's following my test-driven development. As I said, I'm very passionate about test-driven development. It's writing tests, failing tests for everything that it's going to do, and then it's going to implement code to make those tests pass. This is an excellent technique both for human developers and for large language models to stay on track and know that they've built an implementation that does the things that they wanted to. Um, Highly recommend the book Test Driven Development by Example by Kent Beck. That was an eye opener in my career when I first read it about 20 years ago. All right, the tests are failing now, just as we wanted, and it's going to generate implementations to make them pass. This pitch shift node um, is a thin wrapper for that dependency. Of course, you can see all that in the GitHub once this is done. Check the description of this video for a link to the GitHub. Now we're implementing the ring mod node. That's going to give that pulsing quality to some of the voices. Putting it all together with that voice changer node factory, that's going to register the switchboard extension. All right. Now it's building the project, running the tests. Pretty typical for a large language model to fail at its first go around. Yeah, it didn't have a main CPP. Put that together, and now it's asking me if it can use CMake to build it all. Finding some missing dependencies, APIs that didn't get quite right. Pretty typical. This is why we test. The nice thing about using Claude Code inside of VS Code is that you can follow along really easily with that project explorer and open up files, wave files, anything you want, and see what Claude is doing as it does it. Made a couple of changes to make it compile properly. I'm not yet sussed out why sometimes Claude allows you to say yes and don't ask me again for other similar commands sometimes and not other times. If you know, let me know in the comments. All right, the build has succeeded and we're going to run our tests. Pitch shift frequency test has failed. Making some assumptions here that it needs warm-up time. I'm not sure I agree, but I don't disagree enough to stop it here. Let's see what it figures out. Still thinks it doesn't have enough input. Again, not sure I totally agree, but I'm happy to let Claude test its own reasoning. It now has realized that it was wrong in that assumption. That was pretty quick. Now it has another hypothesis that maybe the number of semitones that it's shifting is not quite right. Maybe some API problems. Note how little intervention I've had to do here. Aha, testing more hypotheses. Aha. So it was setting a formant shift without really understanding what that would do, and now it's with on its own merits, it's checked the documentation and realized what it did wrong. Still no intervention from me. And actually, sort of a fun lesson on how the Signalsmith library works. So it's going to preserve, add some full formant preservation, so no formant shifting, which it's a little bit disappointing. That might have been useful on these voice changes, but again, it's working now, so we can tune that later if we want. We'll hear how the voices sound and then make a decision. Okay, all the tests pass. Now we're defining voice presets. That was it. It's got 10 different voices. We're building the console application, the actual user interface at this point. Really is remarkably little input from me up to this point, isn't it? I gave it a lot of context at the beginning. I reviewed its plan. I made sure it had its dependencies in place, but other than that, it's just going through the to-dos. We'll see if it works. The proof of the pudding is in the eating, and never more true than coding with LLMs. There you can hear those Harvard sentences coming through. Actually sounded pretty good for a first pass. I can't wait to test it a little bit more once it's done building this application. There it is, keeping that to-do list up to date. A little bit later, I'll cut out the, I'll start a new Claude session and you'll see why that is useful. All right, we have run out of context. Our window is closed. Perfect time, having updated the to-do list with our current progress. Basically, this compacting function, if you don't do anything with your context window, then it fills it all the way up, and then it writes a summary of everything that's transpired, so that it can pass it to a new session with a brand new context window. You can just happily, and I think I'm going to in this case, let this go automatically. But I find it often helpful to manage that context window with the to-do list that you can review manually and make sure that it's doing everything that you want it to. Just having a quick look at the extension. Quick code review. It's pretty straightforward. Just registering the extension, implementing the initialization functions. Looks pretty good. All right, that compacting is done. It's giving me a status of what it's done already. It says it's ready for live microphone testing. Let's give that a shot. Just going to open up the terminal here so that I can run the application and have it recorded.
The store was jammed before the sale could start. The store was jammed before the sale could start.
The store was jammed before the sale could start.
The store was jammed before the sale could start. The store was jammed before the sale could start. The store was jammed before the sale could start. The store was jammed before the sale could start.
All right, that sounded okay, but obviously there's some fading as it goes on, and the pitch shifting didn't sound right. It's the chipmunk sounded like it was lower, not higher, like I would expect. So something about processing is wrong. I'm just going to give it a little cue. And I'm going to tell it to test that so that we don't break it going into the future. It's adding the test now, and it's going to build and run it. I'm going to allow it to do any invoke commands it wants. Oh, invoke had an issue, but that's okay. It can run CMake directly. The door was jammed. Sorry. Sounded much better. All right. Looks like it found an error in the way that it was using the formant shifting API. It's a multiplier, not a value, so not a absolute value. So it recognized how it wants to use the API properly, and it's going to add a test that demonstrates it. Allow it to run voice changer tests. Let's see how it does. Looks like that test came out as expected, and it's going to keep some notes about how to use that API. I asked it to record that into Claude.md so that we don't have to remind it again in the future. Best pass, it's going to update the to-do list. Give me a little summary. Chipmunk wasn't right. Document it into Claude for future reference. Let's test it out again.
The door was jammed before the sale could start.
The store was jammed before the sale could start.
The store was jammed before the sale could start. The store was jammed before the sale could start.
The store was jammed before the sale could start.
The store was jammed before the sale could start.
The store was jammed before the sale could start.
The store was jammed before the sale could start.
The store was jammed before the sale could start.
The store was jammed before the sale could start.
So that sounded pretty good for a one shot, but a lot of the voices were very similar to one another. So I'm going to tell it to apply some switchboard audio effects and different combinations to make them a little bit different. There with pretty minimal input. It's correctly identified all of the switchboard audio effects available in that extension. And it's going to go ahead and start implementing them. Applying the effects to each preset. Now, as usual, gives me a little summary of everything that it did. Now this would be the
store was jammed before the sale could start.
The store was jammed before the sale could start.
The store was jammed before the sale could start. The store was jammed before the sale could start.
The store was jammed before the sale could start.
The store was jammed before the sale could start.
The store was jammed before the sale could start.
The store was jammed before the sale could start.
The store was jammed before the sale could start.
The store was jammed before the sale could start.
That's very good. Now I'm gonna tell it to go ahead and make sure the Harvard sentences test works. Looking at this, it would be the perfect time to cut out. I've used 97% of my context there. You can see below the text to the prompt box. Probably should have cut out and opened a new session, but I didn't. Okay, and it crashed, so here I had to start up a new VS Code, and I'm just as I said I would. I'm going to tell it to pick up where it left off. For some reason, it was running out of memory. Now, it hasn't caught on that everything was already built, but I'm happy to let it figure that out. Okay, it's running the test again. Now again, this is taking suspiciously long, and this led to a crash of everything of VS Code last time. Um, and so I'm getting a little suspicious. Monitoring system resource usage. Starting to realize that perhaps maybe it's the test itself that is leading to problems here. See, it's having trouble rendering that transmuting. Taking a suspiciously long time. So I'm going to interrupt it and try and get it to stop. Hopefully I'm not too late here. All right. I've stopped it from running. Now, I was monitoring system resources. Now, I've told it to use Valgrind to look for memory issues in the test. We'll see what Valgrind tells us. Just telling it to kill it in 20 seconds, just so that we don't have another out of memory issue.
This door was jammed.
All right, it's found the issue, remarkably. Looks like the wave header parsing was wrong, and it's trying to allocate all the memory for hours and hours of audio. Now, that Harvard sentences wave file isn't that big, so something must be wrong. Looks like it's found a bug in how it's doing the wave header parsing. All right. Claims to have found the issue. Let's see how it fixes it.
Painting the sockets in the wall dull green. A child crawled into the dense
Paint the sockets in the wall.
Paint the sockets in the wall.
Sounds pretty good to me. That's encouraging.
Paint the sockets in the wall.
Yeah, it seems like it is producing output with those Harvard sentences input. Integration tests all pass. Running the full test suite. All the tests pass. And we're gonna test with the live microphone.
The store was jammed before the sale could start. These days, chicken leg is a rare dish. The birch canoe slid over the smooth plank, glued the sheet to the dark blue background.
Sounded fine to me. I'm gonna tell it to commit. Call it a day. All right. That is how you vibe code a voice changer with the Switchboard SDK. You'll see, even with low-level audio development, Switchboard makes it a lot easier to build cross-platform stuff, audio software that does a wide variety of things. Thank you for visiting, and come check out Switchboard.